The morning it all started, I was 61 years old, and the coffee in my tin cup was still hot enough to sting my lip. I remember that detail because everything else about that day has sharpened over time, the way a good blade gets keener with honest use. I was leaning on the porch rail of the house my grandfather built the year Calvin Coolidge was president, watching the sun come up over the crazy mountains the way I had watched it come up 10,000 times before. The windmill out by the corral was turning its slow, patient circle, squeaking once every revolution the way it had since 1934. The air smelled of sage after rain and warm pine. My old blue heeler, Boone, lay snoring at my feet. For 30 full seconds the world was exactly right. Then the ground trembled. Not an earthquake. You feel those in your teeth. This was the low, hungry growl of a big diesel turning my north pasture into something it had never agreed to be. A plume of dust rose above the cottonwoods like a dirty signal flag. I set the cup down, walked to the barn, and saddled Rosie, the bay quarter horse I had raised from a weanling. The leather was still cool. The cinch creaked the same satisfied sound it always makes when a man has work ahead of him. Boone trotted behind us until the grade got too steep, then sat down to watch. By the time Rosie and I crested the rise, the picture was complete and ugly. A D6 bulldozer the color of a school bus had already punched a hole through my east fence wide enough for a semi. Two men in orange vests stood beside a white Ford with Pine Hollow Estates Homeowners Association lettered on the door. My fence posts, hand-split lodgepole my dad and I set the summer Nixon resigned, lay scattered like pickup sticks. The wire was curled back the way you peel the skin off an orange. I sat my mare and let the silence stretch until the driver killed the engine. "Morning," I said, touching the brim of my hat out of habit more than courtesy. "Mind telling me what you're doing on Henry Grayson's land?" The older man, sun-leathered and missing the tip of his left ring finger, hooked a thumb toward the clipboard. "Work order. Community access road. Temporary easement. County signed off 3 days ago." I eased Rosie forward until her shadow fell across the clipboard. "County doesn't own this dirt. My family has since Grover Cleveland was sending telegrams. Show me the easement." He hesitated, then handed over a single sheet. My signature stared up at me in blue ink. The loops were too round, the slant too careful. Henry Grayson signs his name the way he drives a post, quick, hard, and final. This looked like a woman practicing cursive in the margin of a church bulletin. "That's a lie on paper," I said, handing it back. "Shut her down." The younger man shifted his weight. "Look, mister, we just run the iron." The lady from the HOA said everything was squared away. "Lady have a name?" "Eleanor Ramsey. She's on her way." I nodded once. The way you nod when you hear a coyote and know the chickens are already nervous. "Then we'll wait." I swung down, ground-reined Rosie, and walked the torn fence line slow, running my hand along the top wire the way my dad taught me, feeling for tension, for truth. The broken posts still smelled green. Sap bled like slow tears where the dozer had snapped them. I knelt and pinched a handful of the turned soil. It was the color of coffee with too much cream, the kind of loam that grows 60 bushel wheat and raises cattle that bring top dollar in billings. I let it sift through my fingers and felt the old anger settle in behind my eyes, quiet, patient, and mean. A white Escalade came down the ranch road fast enough to rattle the cattle guard. It stopped in a swirl of dust and expensive perfume. Eleanor Ramsey stepped out wearing tan slacks pressed sharp enough to cut hay and a navy blazer that probably cost more than my pickup. She was 53, gym-toned, highlighted, and smiling the way people smile when they have already spent your money in their head. "Mr. Grayson," she called, heels punching holes in my dirt. "I'm so glad we caught you at home." "You didn't catch me, Eleanor. You're standing in my pasture with a stolen signature and a bulldozer." Her smile thinned, but held. "The board voted unanimously for a community safety corridor. The easement was recorded last week. Here's your copy." She held out a folder thick enough to stop a .22. I didn't take it. "I've got the real deed in the saddlebag. Been in the family since 1923. No easement, no right-of-way, no nothing. You're trespassing." She opened the folder anyway and produced the single page with the fake signature. "This says differently. And obstructing an approved project is $500 a day." I looked past her at the dozer, at the torn earth, at the men waiting for one of us to blink. "Start the meter," I said. "But that machine doesn't turn another inch until a judge tells me different." The driver looked at the older man. The older man looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at me the way a woman looks at a horse that just refused to jump she was sure it would take. "This is a community benefit, Henry. Emergency vehicles, school buses. School buses been running the county road just fine for 70 years. And the fire department already has a key to my gate. You want a shorter route to your wine tastings, build it on your side of the line." For a long second the only sound was the windmill squeaking and the tick of the cooling engine block. Then Eleanor nodded to the driver. He reached for the key. I stepped between the dozer and my fence, boots planted the way you plant a post you never intend to move. "Son," I said quiet, "you drop that blade one more inch, and you'll be explaining to a judge why you thought a forged piece of paper was worth your CDL." He froze. Eleanor's smile finally cracked. "You're making a mistake." "No, ma'am," I said. "You already made it. I'm just the man who's going to make you pay for it." She stared at me a full 10 seconds, the kind of stare that would wilt most men. Then she spun on her heel, got back in the Escalade, and left in a spray of gravel that pinged off the dozer like hail. The driver killed the engine. The older man lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "We'll wait for the lady's next instructions," he said. "You do that," I told him. And while you're waiting, you can start putting my fence back exactly the way you found it." They did. I stood there until the last staple was driven and the wire sang tight again. Then I mounted Rosie, tipped my hat to the crew, and rode home slow, letting the land settle back around me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table under the same kerosene lamp my grandmother read by, the forged easement on one side, the real deed on the other. The difference between truth and lie has never been clearer than it was in that yellow circle of light. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Ruth Caldwell, the toughest property lawyer in southwest Montana. The second was to the county sheriff, Tom Wheeler, a man I had pulled out of a snowdrift in 1998. By sunrise the next day, I had a temporary restraining order in my pocket and a deputy posted at my gate. That was only the beginning. Over the next 6 weeks, Eleanor tried everything. Fines that arrived by certified mail. Anonymous phone calls at 2 in the morning telling me to take my family and leave before something burned. A petition signed by 47 Pine Hollow residents claiming historical use of my North 40. Someone poisoned my stock tank and I lost 2 heifers before I got the water tested. I answered none of it with anger. I answered with receipts. Trail cameras recorded every vehicle that crossed my line. I documented every threatening letter, every dead calf, every slashed tire. Ruth filed motion after motion until the judge finally set a date. And in the quiet hours before the storm broke, I did the thing nobody expected. I filed for a private toll road permit on the exact strip they had tried to steal. The same county office that had accepted Eleanor's forgery stamped my application approved in 48 hours. Turns out when the paperwork is real and the landowner is standing there in person, things move quick. I built the gate myself. 2 12-foot cedar posts sunk 4 feet in concrete. A crossbeam I milled from a beetle kill pine that came down in the 21 windstorm. I painted it barn red and hung the sign in letters tall enough to read from a quarter mile. Grayson Ranch Private Toll Road. $10 per vehicle. Cash, check, or Venmo. Violators will be prosecuted. Have a nice day. I wired 4 solar cameras that sent footage straight to my phone and bolted an iron lockbox to the post. Then I sat on the porch with Boone and waited. The first car came at 7:12 the next morning. A silver BMW driven by a woman I recognized from the petition. She slowed, read the sign twice, then rolled her window down. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious, ma'am. $10 or turn around." She argued for 5 full minutes. I just sipped my coffee and waited. Finally, she dug a crumpled tin out of her purse and threw it at the lockbox like it burned her fingers. "Thank you for using Grayson Ranch Road," I said, tipping my hat. By the end of the week, half the subdivision was paying me every morning and every evening. The lockbox was so full I had to empty it into a coffee can. I never smiled when they paid. I just nodded and said, "Thank you," same as if they were buying a bale of hay. Eleanor showed up the following Monday with Tom Wheeler riding shotgun in the sheriff's cruiser. "This is extortion," she shouted before the dust even settled. Tom took my permit, read it slow, then looked at the survey stakes I had repainted blaze orange every 50 feet. "Everything's in order, Eleanor," he said. "Far as the county's concerned, Henry owns the road and he can charge whatever he wants to drive on it." She paid the $10 with a $100 bill and told me to keep the change. I dropped it in the box anyway. The courtroom in Bozeman that October was standing room only. Ranchers I had known my whole life sat shoulder to shoulder with Pine Hollow residents in Patagonia vests. The air smelled of coffee, wool, and nervous sweat. Ruth laid it out like a hand of cards you can't beat. The forged easement, the midnight fence cutting, the poisoned water tank, the county zoning officer who took a $5,000 bribe to fast-track the paperwork. When she played the footage of 2 HOA board members in Pine Hollow polo shirts running from my gate with bolt cutters in their hands, you could have heard a grasshopper fart. Eleanor's lawyer, some slick kid from Denver, tried to call it a series of unfortunate misunderstandings. Judge Ellen Redhawk cut him off with a look that could freeze brandy. "Counselor, forging a man's name and poisoning his cattle is not a misunderstanding. It's felony." She turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Ramsey, did you authorize construction on land you knew belonged to Mr. Grayson?" Eleanor stood, chin high, voice shaking just enough to hear. "The board believed the easement was valid." "Answer the question." "Yes." Judge Redhawk's gavel came down like a rifle shot. "Easement declared fraudulent and void. Pine Hollow Estates HOA ordered to pay $542,000 in trespass damages, veterinary bills, and punitive awards. Any future entry on Grayson Ranch without written permission will be treated as criminal trespass. Court is adjourned." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Somebody in the back row started clapping, and the whole place followed until the bailiff called for order. Outside the courthouse, the sky was October blue and the cottonwoods were turning gold. Tom Wheeler shook my hand so hard my shoulder hurt for a week. "You just made a lot of folks think twice before they draw a line through another man's pasture," he said. Charles Langford, the developer who had bankrolled the whole scheme, lost his shirt when the banks called his loans. Eleanor sold her 6-bedroom mansion for pennies on the dollar and moved to Scottsdale. The HOA dissolved itself before Christmas. My lockbox money built a new hay barn, paid my grandson's first year at Montana State, and bought a bronze plaque I bolted to the cedar gate. This road was paid for by those who tried to steal it. 2025. Some evenings I still sit on the porch with Boone's grandson asleep at my feet and watch the sun drop behind the crazies. The gate stands open now. The toll sign is gone, but the cedar posts are there, solid as ever. Cars slow down sometimes, read the plaque, and drive on quiet. Once in a while, somebody leaves a $10 bill in the old lockbox out of respect. I leave it there for the next man who needs to remember what happens when you try to take what a Montana rancher has sworn to keep. The grass has grown back thick and green across the scar. The fence runs straight and true. The windmill still squeaks once every turn, same as it did the morning they thought they could redraw my lines. I never raised my voice. I never lifted a hand in anger. I just made them pay to use the land they tried to steal, one $10 bill at a time, until the law finally caught up and finished the job. That is the whole story from the first dust cloud to the last gavel. Now I want to hear yours. Have you ever had somebody with money and a title try to take what your people bled for? Did you fight loud, or did you fight quiet? Did you keep your ground, or are you still standing in it? Tell me in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from, and whether you still believe a 61-year-old rancher with clean paperwork and a stubborn heart can beat an HOA and a crooked developer in this country, or if those days are gone for good. I read every single one. Speak plain. The porch light is on and the coffee's hot.